Are we recording? You got a little sign?
Yeah, it said recording in progress. And then I had to click got it.
All right, awesome. So Heather, do you still agree to the consent recording of this podcast
I do.
and the subsequent release of this podcast on various platforms?
Yep.
All right, now that we got the legalities out of the way, good morning, Heather.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm glad I got you on the show.
Yeah.
Pretty early on when we met. I think I met you before I started doing this, and I was thinking,
Yes.
wow, she'd be a good guest. Just the way she articulates herself and everything is pretty cool.
Well, thanks. Sorry, my dog just like bolted out of the bedroom.
Yeah. He doesn't like my sound of my voice.
You're in a earphone, but
okay.
He doesn't usually run. He's old and has no energy, so that was weird.
Yeah. Hopefully everything's all right.
So far, so good.
Yeah. So I want to begin with you, like just kind of, let's start from the beginning. Like, can you tell everybody where you're from?
Oh, I'm Heather. I'm from Texas.
And where in Texas are you from? That's all right.
Oh, I'm I'm from the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
That's fun. Oh, yeah, I think I've been there. Yeah. When I was a kid, I went there. My one and only time.
Oh.
As a kid, I went there. And I remember it being really, really hot.
Yeah, if you go in the summer, it's ridiculously hot. But if you haven't been there since you've been a kid, you wouldn't recognize it.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Because I remember I went to Florida, to Tampa, when I was a kid. That same year, I went on like 3 vacations in one summer. I went to Florida, to Tampa. I think I did like Disney World and all that. And then I went to Puerto Rico. And then right when we got back from Puerto Rico, and I was sunburnt because I got that light skin. I was sunburnt from Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. And then going to Texas did not help with the sunburn at all.
Yeah. We were actually just in Texas, and we had gone to a water park with my in-laws.
Mm-hmm.
And I put sunscreen on my face, but I forgot to put sunscreen like on my shoulders and my chest. And then that was miserable for a couple of days.
Oh God, I hate it. I'm not a big fan of the sun. I'm not a big fan of summer. Like, I like the activities that we do, like the water parks and barbecues and all that stuff. I just hate, one, being sunburned because I got such light skin, and then just being hot and miserable. Oh God.
Yep. Yeah, thankfully my mom kept her house cold, so I didn't really have to deal with the heat of being sunburnt.
Uh-huh.
But there was a lot of like lotion and aloe vera application pretty much on an hourly basis.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, what do you do? Like, do you remember being younger and getting sunburned bad? Did you guys have like a special way to deal with it or treat it?
No. We didn't really go out and do much during the summers. Both my parents worked.
Uh-huh.
And we lived out in the country. I mean, the closest like town area to us was probably a good 30 to 45-minute drive. And when you're 14 and can't drive and both your parents work, you don't really go anywhere for the summer.
Oh, that had to be hard for you. Teenage.
Yeah.
And you can't go anywhere, you're just stuck in like a rural area.
Yeah, all my neighbors had like cows and chickens.
That's a lot different than me in my childhood. Yeah, I was stuck in the middle of New York City. I didn't have money to do a lot of things, but I can go like everywhere and see other people having fun.
Nope.
Yeah. So were you like a farm girl or?
No. So my dad is a pilot for a private jet company, and then my mom writes computer programs.
Ooh.
Yeah. So we just lived in a normal house, but we were surrounded by farmers and ranchers.
Yeah. So I'm guessing they like the isolation, the sort of being out in the middle of nowhere.
My mom does. My dad does not. My dad's pretty social.
Uh-huh.
He would rather be around all of the people and have everything in really close proximity. My mom is the hermit. And because my mom wanted to live out in the middle of nowhere, that's why we moved.
Yeah, yeah, I can relate to that. In
Yes.
relationships, like what my wife wants, happy wife, happy life. I'm like, yes, babe, that's we'll do that.
I don't like that phrase.
No, so why not?
No, because it shouldn't be just about the wife, it should be about both. So I say happy spouse, happy house.
Yes, that's a good one.
So if both are happy, then that's good. Because I think that's what it should be. Both are happy.
Yeah, ideally, I think that I guess traditionally the relationship kind of men had all the power, I guess, back in the days. So I guess I think the thought of it was the least you could do is give your wife this or that and make her happy.
Yeah, but it's 2021. It's not like that anymore.
Yeah, I think we're gonna get into a lot of little topics like about that. But let's so you went in, you grew up in a rural area. What was your
Mhm.
upbringing like? Were you the only child?
No, so I have a half brother. He's a year and a half older than I am. And we grew up in the church. And so
Okay.
all of our friends were people from church. And then
Uh-huh.
our school was attached to a church.
Okay.
So everywhere we went, all of it was just church related. We didn't do anything really outside of that. I didn't have friends who didn't go to church. I didn't have friends who didn't go to private schools.
Right.
Um,
So you were sort of in a bubble, it sounds like the church bubble.
yeah, I was in a massive bubble until I joined the army. That was
That's how you burst the bubble.
pretty much, yeah.
So I want to go back real quick because I talk about religion a lot on here. What was your views on religion back then? Do you remember like when you were growing up?
I mean, we were essentially non-denominational. It
Mm-hmm.
was whatever the Bible says goes.
Mm.
And my grandmother teaches Bible study. And so if I ever had any questions about it, I would just go to her. And she was pretty on top of being able to answer any question that I had.
Oh, okay. So I'm thinking about myself. Like I didn't go to church all the time, but I remember going to
Mhm.
church and talking about religion. Even now, I think about God and religion and all that stuff. But I know that I always, even back then, had issues with uh, something just smelled fishy too. That's just me personally growing up. Did you have any issues believing, or were you just 100% a believer? What they said, and that was it.
I didn't I didn't start questioning anything until I got out of that environment.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
interesting. So that made the military just a complete shock. Then is what I'm guessing.
Uh yes and no. I mean, there were aspects about it that were shocking to me, but there were aspects about it that I think I was kind of ready for anyways. Um I don't know. It's been a really long time. So
Yeah. Well, what was?
I've
Can
been
you give us an
out.
example of what was shocking?
Um, all of the girls having to shower in one area with no shower stalls and no curtains. I had
Yeah.
never been in an environment like a locker room. I'd never been in a
Yeah.
locker room environment.
Oh wow.
The schools that I went to growing up, yes, we had sports,
Uh-huh.
but everything was so segregated with everybody that there was no opportunity. Like we didn't have locker rooms. There was like one room upstairs where all of the girls went to go change into
Right.
their PE uniforms,
Uh-huh.
but there were areas where it was easier for you to like hide your body so you could change.
All right. Yeah, you had a little bit more privacy. It wasn't like a big open, a whole bunch of
Right.
naked women cleaning their body parts in front of you.
Right. Yeah. So that to me was like the biggest shock. I had never been in that environment before. I was really uncomfortable for like the
Oh
first
wow.
I think I was really uncomfortable for the first probably week. And then after we got out of like that in processing reception area and actually started basic training, I stopped caring as much. But that first week was really uncomfortable.
Yeah. So that's funny. Like a lot of people who never been to the minute, they don't understand like how quick you end up adapting to things that were just
Yeah.
completely out of your mind just within a week. Like you said, you're like, whatever, dude. We're
Mm-hmm.
doing
Yep.
this. Let's go. That's
Pretty much.
crazy.
So that was the biggest shock for me, was having to change and shower in front of everybody. I mean,
Yeah,
females anyway.
I bet. You know, it reminds me of well, I'm gonna put my son's business out there, but I think every kid could kind of relate to this. Like you go to high school or junior high school and you've never done anything like that before, and you're kind of like,
Mhm.
what? I got to do what in front of who?
Yep.
Yeah, and if you deploy, man, things can be even like get a little strange, and you're sleeping on top of people, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. I never made it that far.
That's probably a blessing. I don't know.
I don't know. Like I wish that I could have stayed in longer than I did. And there's
Uh-huh.
a lot of times where I'll be thinking about it and I'll genuinely get sad that I wasn't able to stay in.
Oh,
I wish I could have. I signed a 6-year contract. I wish I could have stayed in for at least those 6 years.
okay. So what happened? How come you didn't stay in the whole time?
So I have um I've got a couple different like medical conditions. One of
Mm,
them is one that I kind of don't really want to talk about because it's
okay,
personal.
sure, sure,
But
sure.
the other one, so I have congenital bone deformities in my hips.
Uh,
And it took them about 8 or 9 years to figure it out before I was finally able to have surgery to get my hip fixed. But because I had to have a hip surgery,
uh-huh.
I couldn't go back in. And then
Right.
because all of my bone deformities are bilateral, I've only had one side fixed.
Huh. That's
Because
interesting.
the other side doesn't bother me yet. So they said because it doesn't bother you, just don't touch it, leave it alone. But the there was a lot of hip pain and a lot of basically being on medication for years, and
Ooh,
it wasn't conducive for the military, so I got kicked out pretty quickly.
yeah. I mean, what was that like being on all those medication? That couldn't have been good.
I have this innate fear of becoming a drug addict,
Uh-huh.
and I was absolutely terrified that that was going to end up happening to me because I was on Percocets and Vicodin and
All the good stuff. Yeah.
all the good stuff,
Yeah.
um, for years. And I would go days without taking it. Like before I became a parent, I would go days without taking it because I didn't want my body to become reliant on it. But the days
Right.
that I didn't take it, I was stuck on my couch. I couldn't get up and do anything.
Ooh.
Um, and muscle relaxers too. I was on muscle relaxers on a daily basis also. So
It's not like they were just throwing everything at you. Like, I don't know, here, take this and we'll see.
yeah, yeah. And then um, I don't have very many good things to say about military doctors. And I would go into the doctor complaining about the hip problem. They would give me a shot of steroids.
Cortisol or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would get that steroid shot in my hip, and it's like I could walk into the office, but then I get the steroid shot. Now they got to give me crutches because I can't walk out of the office.
Ooh.
And then I'm on the crutches for about 3 days after I get that shot. And then they send me to an orthopedic surgeon. And there was one where we had gone in, and that guy literally walked into the waiting area and didn't even pull me back into an exam room, was like, what are your complaints? And so I told him, and he looked at me and he goes, this is all soft tissue problems. I can do nothing for you. You need physical therapy. And then just like walked off.
Huh.
Like didn't
Just dismissed you, huh?
I was just completely dismissed. And then I think after probably 6 years of me regularly complaining about my hip, the military doctors once again were finally like, this is all in your head. You have psychological problems. You need to go see a psychiatrist. And
Oh
like
man.
wouldn't listen at all. And it wasn't until we were in Arizona where they didn't have a military hospital. We had a physician's assistant, and if
Uh-huh.
he couldn't do anything, he had to refer you off post. So you
Hmm.
had to go see civilian doctors.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until that guy that he was like, nope, there's definitely some sort of bone deformity issue going on here. I have no idea what this is. We're going to send you somewhere off post. And it wasn't
Hmm.
until that I was actually able to get the help that I needed.
Oh man, that sucks. But I've heard
Yeah.
stories about that. I mean, not just in the military, but like even on the outside. Just I don't know, man. It's just one of those things with doctors. My wife says because she worked in the medical field for a long time that as smart as doctors are, and you know, obviously most of them are pretty smart. They're basically just taking guesses at stuff. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I think sometimes you see something, it's obvious, like, oh, here's an X-ray. This is the way your arm's supposed to be. Your arm is broken like that. But most of the other stuff, you're
Yeah.
kind of just guessing.
Yeah. So I had actually pulled all of my medical records
Mhm.
and I combed through all of the x-ray reports.
Mm.
All of the answers have always been in my x-ray reports. Not once did any of them ever look at it. And that was actually how I found it,
Yeah.
because I had had an MRI and the MRI was like, oh, you have a little bit of fluid buildup in your hips, but there's nothing wrong with you. And I'd never seen an x-ray report.
Uh-huh.
And that was when I went and pulled my own x-ray report, saw all of these different diagnoses. And then I went and talked to the PA and I was like, what is all of this? And he's looking at it going, I have no idea. I've never seen any of these before. You need to go
Right.
talk to somebody else. But
And
it's always been in my x-ray reports. They've just never looked at it.
yeah, I mean, I don't know why. Maybe they just never seen it before or something, but that's unfortunate. I'm glad you finally got the help you needed though. You feel much better now?
I do. I pretty much live in the gym now.
I was gonna say, because you don't look like the kind of person who sits on a couch all the time. Not at all.
No, no, I'm very much like, I need to get out of the house. I need to be doing something. I need to be active.
Yeah.
I'm very social and I would rather be not at home.
Yeah. So were you like that since you were a little kid? Like what were you like? What was young Heather like? A little bit of tomboy running around there. What were you doing?
Yeah, tomboy. I got into skateboarding for a little bit when I was a teenager, so that was pretty fun. I would have preferred being out of the house and doing sports all the time, but again, like we lived out in the middle of nowhere. Both my parents worked, and so I couldn't be social because of where we lived. But also my mom, the way that I'm not going to divulge
Yeah, yeah,
her
yeah.
teenage years, but she was afraid that I was going to end up doing some of those same things. So she pretty much wanted to keep me under her thumb at all times. And if I left the house, I couldn't be under her thumb. So I had that going for me too.
Yeah, man, I always tell people like, we have to be careful for our kids, but you also have to be careful to, I guess you got to inoculate your kids. Like you just can't keep them under a rock because
Yeah.
it just like when you repress something, if they have that curiosity, if they're asking about something, if they're doing something, in a way, like we have to explore it. Because if you just keep it away, I think like you just make it worse. It's just 10 times worse.
Yep. I would agree with that statement.
Yeah. The problem is always like, how do you do it though? Because you don't want to be the
Yeah.
parent that like, how could you do that to your child if people are talking crap about you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would have preferred having a social childhood. I did not. It was a lot of, I'm going to sit around my house and read books all day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which helped me out in high school because I was able to test out of literature my freshman year of high school because I had a post college graduate reading level and comprehension.
Awesome.
So because of that, I didn't have to take literature in high school. I just tested out of it.
Yeah. So let's talk about your background. Where's your family from?
So my mom's family, they're pretty much Texas born and raised for as long as I can remember. My grandfather was first generation Mexican American. His mother, her name was Alicia. They immigrated to the United States when she was 10. And then my grandmother is actually from Colombia.
So she went from Colombia to Mexico to United States.
So my grandfather was first gen Mexican American. He was born in San Antonio, Texas. Born and raised in Texas, joined the Army Air Corps back when the Air Force and Army were one. And then when he got out, he became a geophysicist and he traveled the world for work, which is how he ended up in Colombia, which is where he met my grandmother. And then he told his job, basically, I want to stay in Colombia. So he stayed there. And he and my grandmother got married. And then that's where my dad was born.
Okay. So you got like a Colombian Mexican mix going on there.
I do.
But you definitely look like a white girl. I could say that because I look like a white boy. So I could say that.
Yeah, I have. What's funny is when I was in Texas, I was hanging out with a friend of mine and he's African American. And I had said something and he just looked at me and he was like, I've never heard you talk like that before. And I had said, I think I was talking about Colombia and I had gotten excited about something. And so like there was some sort of an accent that popped out.
Oh,
And
okay.
he goes, I always forget that you're Latina. I always forget. I was like, yeah, it's a pretty easy thing to forget, when you look at me.
Yeah, yeah. I grew up the same way, and I don't know what your experience was, but I would like you to share it. But my experience was whenever I was with Latinos, I was a white kid. And
Mm-hmm.
whenever I was with white kids, I was a Latino. So I didn't know what the hell was going on with me when I was growing up.
I got made fun of a lot for the way that I looked
Uh-huh.
because I had a very obviously Hispanic maiden name. It was Urrutia. Um, Proper pronunciation would be Urrutia. And, all of the Hispanic kids would see that and they would start speaking to me in Spanish. And I'm just like, sorry, I
No
don't speak
hablo
any of that.
español. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then, I would get these looks and they would wander off. And then the white kids never really said anything unless I would openly talk about my dad being from South America.
Hmm.
And then they would be like, but you don't look white, or but you look white.
Right.
You don't look Hispanic. It's like, well, that's just, I don't know what to tell you. But when it came to the Hispanic community, I was never really accepted. And when I was 19, I had gone in for a job interview at a restaurant, and the hiring manager was Hispanic. He came out and he interviewed me and saw my last name and tried to do the interview in Spanish. And I looked
Huh.
at him and I was like, sorry, I don't speak Spanish at all.
Right.
And he looked at me and was like, he goes, you don't speak Spanish. I said,
Yeah, I just said
no,
that.
I just said that.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he goes, so you're Latina and you speak no Spanish. You are a traitor to our kind. And then just got up and
Oh,
walked off. I was like, I
what an a-hole.
I was shocked. And at 19, like I should have gone and said something to his boss about that.
Right.
But I was 19. I was very, because of the way that I had grown up where I couldn't be social the way that I wanted to, I couldn't be outspoken the way that I wanted to. I was too shy to do that. So I was just like, okay, I guess I'm just not going to work here then.
Yeah. So I'm glad you shared that story because I feel like that happens a lot. I remember uh my first couple of years in the military, in the Navy back then. And I met a bunch of other, because I grew up as big as a melting pot as New York City is, and it is. They literally have everything. You
Yeah.
you end up in little bubbles, right? And so I lived in a poorer neighborhood. It was mostly Black and Puerto Rican until I became a teenager, and then we moved to a more Europeanist area. But
Okay.
majority of all the Spanish that I heard or Latin culture was very Puerto Rican or Dominican, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
when I joined the military and I would hear other people from different countries like talk and stuff like that, it was like a big, big, big culture shock. Like they would like,
Yeah.
I know Mexicans say way all the time, orale way and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And I'd be like, way, what way? What are you talking about? Which way? I don't get it. You know what I mean? But it took a little
Right.
while, but the point I was trying to get to relate it to what you were saying when you shared your story was that it became kind of cliquish. Uh,
Yeah.
but everyone integrates in the military, everyone's integrated, but there definitely be like little cliques. And I was kind of in
Mm-hmm.
the Latino clique, but I noticed that they were some people, not everyone, were very mean to people. Like if they would call you whitewash, maybe you seen whitewash. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
my Spanish was never great, but I had a better understanding of the language. You couldn't come up to me and talk shit in front of me. I would
Right.
know, you know what I mean? And I could fire back a few words. I got better at it later on because I went to college and I studied a little bit, but it just always stuck in my head. Like if we would not do that, if we would just support each other and say, oh, you don't know that much Spanish? Would you like to learn?
Yeah.
Or you know what I mean? Or just accept somebody. Like that's just the way. Okay, you don't know that much Spanish. That's all right. I speak English. let's be friends. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I did get pretty good with Spanish. So after that job interview that went ridiculous, I had gotten a job at Burger King, and I was the only essentially white girl in there. I was definitely the only legal person working in there.
Yeah.
But there was a kid, and I can't remember his name, but I can't remember if he had a green card or what his deal was, but he was
Uh-huh.
trying to get American citizenship, and the citizenship test is in English.
Mhm.
And he didn't really speak English at all. And so we had a deal going on where, hey, I'll help you with your English if you help me with my Spanish. And it had gotten to a point where, like, the only Spanish at that point that I needed had to do with restaurant. If you
Right.
needed to order something off of the menu, I got you. And I had gotten really good at that. And it was funny. There's some people who can look at me and be like, you're of Hispanic descent. And then there's other
Mhm.
people who look at me and go, you're 100% white.
Yes.
And it's funny because, we would get all of these construction workers, and some of them would look at me and just like start speaking Spanish and expect me to know it. And when I first started working with that guy, I was like, I don't speak Spanish, sorry. And then other people would come in and they would like look around me like, hey, I need to order
Can I
food. I
find
can't order
someone
food.
else? Yeah.
Yeah. And then towards the end of it, it had gotten to a point where they would come in and just start speaking to me, and I could speak to them.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it was very basic, how's your day? How are you
Yeah.
doing? What would you like to order? Hey, your order's ready. So it was all food related.
Uh-huh.
So I'd actually gotten really good with that part. And then I joined the Army. And when we were in basic training, one of our drill sergeants was like, you're in the US military. If you're in your US Army uniform, you will not speak anything other than English, because that is our language. And if we hear you speaking anything other than English, you will get in trouble, and you will be,
Okay, what year
doing
is this when you
push-ups.
joined?
Or 2009.
Oh, wow, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And what's funny is she's Latina. The drill
Uh-huh.
sergeant who was telling us that we couldn't speak anything but English,
Yeah.
she was Latina. And I was like, okay. And I'm brand new in the military. I don't know anything. So like, I was like, oh, okay, if that's the rule, that's the rule. Like, sure. So then we only ever spoke English, and then got to AIT, and they never said anything about languages. But most everybody that I was with, everybody spoke English. There
Right.
was one girl from Puerto Rico, and I avoided her. And there was another girl, and she was from the Dominican Republic. And the girl from Puerto Rico and the girl from the Dominican Republic, they avoided each other because they didn't like each other.
Ooh, Latino drama.
Yeah, pretty much. But
Yeah.
the girl from Puerto Rico, she had a crush on me and would not leave me
Ooh.
alone.
Ooh, okay. Some
And
harassment going on.
there was a lot of it going on from her. So it was one of those things where if I saw her in the room, I would just immediately leave the room, because I knew she was going to come say some nonsense to me.
Wow, she was just upfront with it, huh?
Oh yeah, I was on the phone with Ryan one day, and she took the phone from me to ask him for his permission to go to town on me.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, she was very bold. Very
And
bold.
Ryan is your husband, right?
Yes.
And what did he say? Sure. No.
No, he
Send me pictures. No.
no, he was shocked, and he was like, uh it's like, you're gonna have to ask her. Can I talk to my wife?
Oh, what a nice guy.
He didn't know how to respond to that, because nothing like that had ever happened before.
Yeah, yeah.
So I probably could have practiced Spanish with her, but I just,
She would have wanted something in return, it sounds like.
yeah, I was
Something you're
not
probably
having
not
that.
willing to give. I don't know.
No.
I have oh man, I want to put a little bit of family business. I won't say who she is, but people can probably figure it out. I have a cousin who's she's gay, and growing up, she would give me a lot of advice about, like, talking to women and stuff like that. And she would say
Mhm.
stuff that was so forward, so aggressive. But I do that. Yeah, but you're a woman talking to a woman. I'm a guy talking to a woman. I cannot get away with that. You know what I mean? They'll put me
Yeah.
in jail if I do half the things you're telling me to do.
Yep.
Yeah. She just never got it. Did you
That's
ever
funny.
resolve that situation? Hopefully, I'm not trying to make light too much of your situation, but
No, I mean, it's been 10 years. I still crack jokes about it.
okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't know if it got like serious, if you had to file like harassment or anything like that.
I should have.
Okay.
I 100% should have. Um, I don't know if she'll ever see this podcast, and
Right.
if she does, she'll figure out that I'm talking about her. But she would run through the barracks, and she would be punching all of the girls below the belt.
Uh-huh.
She would
Oh,
be
okay.
doing it. She,
I guess you're
she
not
would be
below the
doing it.
belt. Okay.
Yeah, she would be doing it in a playful manner.
Yes.
But then when she would come up to me, she would go, I'm not touching you because I'm not trying to ruin all that in case I get some of it. I was
Oh,
like, okay.
yeah. So that's definitely,
So
definitely. But I think maybe back then things were a little bit different. And again, I think that we're talking about a woman on a woman. And when we change the
yeah.
scenario to man on woman, it kind of changes things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If it had been a man on woman situation, I would have filed pretty much right away some sort of complaint against this person. But with her, and again, I was also like, I was 20, I was very shy. I
Naive.
wasn't as forward as I am now
Uh-huh.
because I've come out of my shell a lot now. Whereas, I just turned 20. This is my very first time not living with my parents
Right.
or, with any kind of family member. So there was a lot that I was just like, I'm just gonna ignore it.
Yeah.
But that's also how my family is. They look at issues and they just kind of sweep it under the rug and pretend it never even happened. So
Ooh,
that was how I was
denial.
raised.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, not really denial, but if you ignore it, it'll go away.
Yeah. That's kind of the coping skill, huh?
Yeah. So that was how I was raised. If you ignore it, it'll go away eventually. And so
Yeah. I mean, I get it because I think in a way they're right most of the time. Something will go away, but
yeah.
how much damage is occurred at that point? Like if it took 2-3 years for this person to go away or for you to go away, and you took
Hmm.
damage that whole time, then now what are you dealing with, right? Where
Yeah.
if you confronted the issue, maybe instead of 2-3 years was 2-3 days that there was a problem, and you took care of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I probably could have learned a lot of Spanish from her, but I didn't want to give her any ideas. So it was like, okay, I'm just not going to practice Spanish. And then, being in the military, I was actually only in for about a year
Okay.
when all of my hip problems popped up and I had to get out. But I got out, and then my husband was in Japan. So I got out and then immediately went to Okinawa, Japan to go be with him. And I definitely didn't need Spanish over there. You
No.
need Japanese.
Yeah.
So I had to start trying to learn that. And then 2 years later, we came to the States. And by this point, I had already been 3, almost 4 years without needing Spanish at all. And so
Right.
it was all gone.
Yeah. Same thing happened with me
Like,
with Italian when I was living in Italy. I had a
yeah.
pretty good like conversational, basic conversational.
Hmm.
A year after leaving, gone. All of it, just gone.
I believe it. Yep. I believe it. But like I wish I had grown up bilingual. And it's funny. So my dad was born in Bogota. His dad was Mexican. His mother was Colombian. And my dad, talking to him, you would never know that Spanish was his first language.
Wow.
He doesn't remember most of his Spanish either.
Wow, that's interesting. So that's
Yeah.
probably why you
So
didn't grow up with it at home that much, huh?
that's exactly why I didn't grow up with it at home. So when he was a kid and they would be out in public, and if his parents spoke to him in Spanish, he would notice that other people were giving them looks about the fact that they were speaking Spanish in public.
Mm-hmm.
And that in of itself made him uncomfortable. And so in public, he wouldn't speak Spanish. He would respond back to them in English. And then it eventually just became a habit where he would only respond in English.
Yeah.
And he
I think,
started that when he was pretty young.
yeah, I think that's another issue with when Latinos call people traitors or whatever, they're not looking into the whole thing, because I remember hearing stories, because back in the days things were way more racist and tougher back then. I mean, I think of my grandmother who met her husband, because my grandmother was Irish German and her husband was full Puerto Rican, came from Puerto Rico.
Gotcha.
And I remember her marrying a Puerto Rican guy, somewhere in the 1930s. Like, that's a big deal back then, And I think a lot of older people had that kind of mentality where you need to assimilate into the culture. Don't stick out like a sore thumb. So they kind of hid their culture a little bit, to the detriment of us, like the kids, because we didn't pick up on it.
Right.
Yeah. But being an outsider, it's easy. Like, if you were raised in a whole Latin family, in a Latin, Spanish speaking culture, it's easy for you to say, oh, you're whitewashed, something like that, when you don't know the whole history behind it. It's,
you don't know the story behind everything.
Yeah.
So it's not like I chose to not speak Spanish.
Right.
I mean, at this point, now that I'm an adult and not speaking much Spanish, that is my fault for me not studying it and me not going out of my way to find somebody to practice it with.
Yeah.
Like, as an adult now, that is 100% on me. But as a kid, no, I had no control over that. And it's not like I could just go to the bookstore and buy Spanish books. I had no money because I had no job.
Yeah. I don't know, that whole thing, that, I mean, there's that kind of issue with the Latin community. There's another issue is that we're not all the same, right? People are from, there's just so many different Spanish speaking countries. But when you come here, you get labeled as Latino or Hispanic. And if you look at that, like, let's switch the conversation, I guess, to, a political, if you look at it as a demographic, if you bunch all of us together, that's a huge population. That's a huge voting demographic, right? But the problem with that is that we don't all vote the same way. We're not acting together, because I think there's so much infighting in the Latino community that, in a way, we're underserved because of that, where other demographics seem to stick together, I think. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I think everybody's different. I have, I mean, me being like white, I don't really feel like I can speak on like the African American community.
Right.
But I do have friends who don't agree with most of anything that you hear from the African American community, that you hear in the mainstream media.
Right, from the political pundits or whatever, right?
Right. So, I mean, even within like that area, there's still a lot of people who think very, very differently from each other.
Yeah, 100.
So I mean, even with white people, they don't all think the same either. Everybody's different.
Yeah, but I think the point that I'm trying to make, or that I think that separates us from these other groups, is you don't get, I guess you do, but maybe to a lesser degree, you don't get white people coming up to other white people and being like, man, you're not white. You're not one of us.
Oh yeah, that's
or
true.
Black people, like, I think you hear it a little bit with Black people, because I remember when Barack Obama first started running, one of the big questions about his campaign was, and it's on the documentary, there's a documentary out on Obama right now, I think that was one of the issues, which is like, is he Black enough? Because his mom was white and he was raised by, I think, white grandparents, right? That was kind of like a big issue. Is he going to be able to solidify that Black vote? Because are Black people going to accept him? You know what I mean? And I think that's
so the
kind
colorism that
right. Yeah, but he did, right?
community.
He got like 98% of the Black vote or something like that, right? I don't know if you ever get something like that with Latinos.
Probably not.
But imagine if we could. Imagine that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't see that happening. I think there's too much fighting going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Politics, man. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I would love to get into the Latino community, the Latin community, but it's, with me not speaking Spanish, it is a massive hindrance.
Yeah.
And so I've started trying to work on it, and I would like to get my daughter speaking it as well. And we went and bought flashcards where they have both English and Spanish on them.
Get that Rosetta Stone. I think it's helpful.
Yeah. So we've been trying to work on stuff, and like I'll say little phrases here and there, and she can understand those little phrases, and then I'll say another phrase and she's like, what does that mean? And I'm like, oh, well, it means this. And then she'll go, okay. And then, it'll take 5 or 6 times, but then eventually she'll remember it.
It's the perfect time right now. She's young too. Their minds are like a sponge.
Yeah.
And
So,
there's a little bit of a, I don't know how big it is, or if it's very, if it's thriving or not. But I know there's a bit of Latino culture surrounded on the music. Like there's a lot of salsa dancing and
yeah,
stuff like that. That's something you could probably get into if you're
probably.
interested. I
Yeah,
don't know if you're a dancer.
I took ballroom in high school, so
Ooh, there you go. Did you take to it, or did you have 2 left feet?
I remember the waltz. That's the only one that I can still do.
You couldn't have picked a
waltz.
whiter dance, could you?
That was the only one they taught.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. All right. There you go.
Yeah, it was. So I take it back. They did the waltz and they did swing.
Swing was big for a while. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was the waltz, there was swing, and the polka.
The polka. It's hot in the clubs. Polka. It's hot. It's coming back. All the kids are doing the polka.
I know. But it was a free class at the local community center, because at one point in my teenage years I was homeschooled and I had to have some sort of a PE class, and that was what my grandmother signed me up to do.
So you were a polka. That's what you were doing. Did you have at least a partner to dance with, or?
Because it was a free class at the community center, I was the only young person in there, so everybody else was over the age of 60.
Oh wow. You
so
just stuck out like a sore thumb. Yeah.
All my dancing partners were at least 60 years old.
With arthritis.
With arthritis, which was very awkward when you're 15.
I bet. Yeah. Was that a thing for you growing up? Did you go out dancing? I don't think it didn't sound like that. You said you were alone a lot, couldn't get anywhere.
Yeah, it was one semester that I took that ballroom class, and it was only because I needed a PE credit for the homeschooling program that we were doing.
Okay. So you weren't a big partier in your high school days or anything like that?
Mm-mm. No, and then I got married when I was 20. So those young years were like, I could have been partying because I was married. I didn't want to put myself in situations that where I could potentially end up in a situation that I didn't need to be in, even as a single person, but more so as somebody who was married.
Right. Yeah.
I did go out and I partied a lot when we were in Okinawa because my husband was gone all the time. And I had this one friend and she was my drinking buddy. And my husband would leave. And that first Friday that he was gone, she and I were at the karaoke bar.
Knock, coming at your door.
They knew me by name. I didn't even have to pay to sing the songs anymore because it was supposed to be like 100 yen per song.
Yeah.
And I was in there so often that they were like, oh, you're fine. We know you'll come back.
What's your go-to? You got a go-to song?
So for me and my friend, it was Barbie Girl.
Feeding into stereotypes here. Yes, we are.
So, but yeah, so that first Friday that my husband would be gone, me and my friend we were out at the karaoke bar.
Karaokeing it up. Yeah. Have you done that here? Yep. It's pretty big here too, in Korea.
I have not done that here. We were here in Korea for 6 months before COVID hit. And during that first 6 months, like you're still trying to learn the lay of the land and you're trying to learn about the culture and you're trying to, get in the swing of things. But we got here to Korea, and as soon as my husband in processed, I think we were in our house for maybe a week or two, and then he was TDY. So then it was the thing of like, well, if I go out, I need to find a babysitter, but I've been in the country for a month.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody. I don't trust anybody to watch my kid.
Right.
So I'm just not going to go out.
And then COVID rolls in. Yeah.
And then 6 months into it, COVID hit. I was like, well, I guess I'm not going out at all.
So I don't know. I guess I kind of wonder. You have a bunch of tattoos, right? Where did that come from? The love of tattoos.
Well, it started out as a rebellious thing.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm trying to get into that. I'm trying to sneak into there. Yeah. Okay. Let's go.
It started out as a rebellious thing. So the guy that I dated in high school, I was not even supposed to be talking to him.
Why not?
Well, my parents met him one time, and I guess they picked up on something that I didn't at the time, so they
He was a
knew
bad boy.
he was a he was very bad, yeah, and not in a good way.
Oh, okay.
But it was one of those things where, like, I'm 15, I'm young, I'm naive, I don't know anything about anything at this point, and there's this older guy who's giving me a lot of attention, and I really liked the attention.
Right. Sure. That's normal.
Yeah, very normal teenagery things. And it had gotten to a point where so my grandparents lived in an actual like city.
Mhm.
And when I would go to my grandparents' house, I would call my boyfriend and let him know, like, hey, I'm in town,
Mhm.
because he only lived about 15 minutes from my grandparents, whereas when I was at my house, he was an hour away. So it was easier to sneak out of my grandparents' house
Mm.
to go see him. And he was older, he had a license, he had his own vehicle, so he would come pick me up. And then of course, I'm not sneaky at all, so I would get caught every time.
Didn't stop you.
Didn't stop me, no. um so when I was 18, it became a thing of like, I'm 18, you can't tell me who I can and
Mm.
can't date anymore, you
Mm.
can't tell me who I can and can't talk to.
Mhm.
And then it became a thing of like, I finally have control of myself. My parents hate tattoos, so I'm going to go get some tattoos.
Okay. Did this
So
boyfriend have tattoos?
he's the one who took me to the tattoo shops.
Okay. I don't know why, but
So
I'm picturing like this biker guy with prison tattoos.
yeah, it's pretty good
Okay.
description. Yeah,
So
that's a pretty good.
what was your stance on that? Because I know when I was growing up, the bad guy, the bad boy was kind of like the hot thing. Is that still like a thing? What do you think?
I have no idea. I imagine it still is, because I hear stories about my aunt, my mom's older sister,
Mhm.
sneaking out and dating guys that she wasn't even supposed to talk to.
Right. And that's
So I
way
think
before
it's,
you, right? Yeah.
oh yeah. I mean, that was in the 70s.
Prime
70s.
time.
Pretty much, I think it's a thing that's just never going to go away. I think it's something that parents are always going to be dealing with, because, kids are
Oh, don't
kids
tell
and they
me
want
that.
what they
Don't
can't
tell me
have.
that.
Kids are kids, they want what they can't have. And if you tell them they can't go date that guy, they're going to do what they can to go date that guy.
So just so the listeners know, me and Heather are friends because our daughters are friends. They're really cute, and I'll share the story how we met because I don't think you've ever heard my perspective on this.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So we went to a kids party, middle of COVID. So it was like kind of like one of those things where it's the first time to get the kids out, and I think a lot of parents jumped on it, and you were there, and our kids hit it off really, really good, and my wife got your number, and you guys set up a play date and all that stuff. And I remember talking to you, but not too much. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
because there's a bunch of kids, a lot of stuff going on. It was a fun party, by the way. And I show up from work one day, about a week or two later, and there's this woman in my living room. And I did not recognize you at all. I'm like, oh, my wife has a guest. And we started talking. And that's kind of the idea for the podcast. We just started talking random. I felt like our communication was really, really good. And
Yeah.
somewhere midway through the conversation, I'm like, oh, that's the mom. I don't know if you noticed that spark light up in my eyes. I had no idea who you were.
Yeah.
And so somehow that came up.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So go back to that, like because we both have little girls that are very young and impressionable. I don't know if you probably have these apps on your phone, like Facebook or Instagram, TikTok. I'm interested in hearing your take on this because
Okay.
I don't have TikTok, right? but I'm
I don't either.
constantly bombarded with TikTok videos. And
Mhm.
they're have you heard of these TikTok challenges? I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So most of them, at
Mhm.
least the ones that seem to pop up on my phone, probably because I'm a male, are very sexual in nature. They kind of play it off.
Those pop up on mine too.
Yep. So it's not just me. Yeah. What are you thinking
Nope,
about it? Because
not
I'm
me
like,
too.
I don't get the. Okay, so when I first looked at it, I thought it was just kind of playful, maybe kind of fun, but it's happening so much, and they seem to be getting a
Mhm.
little bit more racier and racier. You understand what I'm
Yes.
saying? You understand where I'm kind of going with that? You know?
Yeah, it bothers me. Like
Okay.
if these girls are over the age of 18, you do you, I don't care. But like, and it gets into the whole like girls shouldn't have to be modest and girls shouldn't have to do this because, boys need to learn to keep their thoughts to themselves and need to keep their eyes to themselves and yada
Mm-hmm.
yada yada. And I agree with that to a point, but then when you have a teenage boy who is going through puberty and is got a boatload of hormones flowing through his system,
Mm-hmm.
it is going to make it a lot harder for him to control those thoughts and emotions because there's a lot about his body that at this point in time he pretty much can't control.
Right. He's got raging hormones telling him to procreate, but he's got a
Right.
minor's brain. His brain hasn't fully matured yet. Not a good combination.
Right. Yeah. And then, there's also, for me, because it is something, again, and I'm not going to like divulge details, but it's
Yeah.
something that like people in my family have had to deal with.
Okay.
And that is older men preying on those younger girls. And when you
Mm.
have somebody who is 13, 14 years old and they're doing their makeup and dressing their clothes to where they look older, they're going to get preyed on by those men and they are putting themselves in a position to become a victim.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's their fault,
No, we're not blaming the victim right now.
but when they're that young, they don't really know any better.
I
So it's not something that they're really going to think about of like, oh, if I go do this, like I'm going to get this attention that I don't need
right.
from a person who belongs in prison.
Yeah. It's kind of like what you were saying about, being 15 years old and getting attention from this younger guy. I was never, a pretty young girl, right? I just never was. And but I get it. Like I have enough empathy, enough, theory of mind that I could put myself, I think, in a young woman's perspective, that's sort of like a drug. Like it's so addictive because I get attention sometimes, and I'm like, wow, that feels great. Imagine being a young, pretty woman, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden, all this attention. Like, how do you cope with that? How do you resist it? How do you not get caught up in a negative way? Because I think enjoying the attention is necessarily nothing wrong with enjoying attention, right? But there's
Right.
definitely like an area where you don't want to go.
Yeah.
But the push is to go there.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that's what I'm saying. Like it's tough for women. A guy saying
Yeah.
it's tough for women. But I think that it's just, in a way, women are getting two messages, which is don't be that way. Don't be too sexual, but at the same time, like you have to be, right? Because I think that's what these
Right.
videos are. Like, how do we put the message out? Like, don't let men sexualize you. Yet here's all these women doing these TikTok challenges, which is
Yeah, that's kind of
super
my whole
sexual.
thing is like if you want people to stop sexualizing you, maybe stop doing the things that are sexualized.
There you go. You summed it up. You put everything together for me. Thank you. But I
Like
can't
that's
say that, I think.
oh, I get flack for saying it. I get a lot of flack for saying things like that.
But I'm
Because,
I'm glad that you say it. I think it needs to be said because
it does.
yeah, it's
And I've
confusing for women. I think it is.
It is, and for very impressionable young girls, and I mean, I was even talking to my husband about it when I was just in the States. Which it's funny being in Korea for 2 years, like I get used to being here and then I go back to my own country and it's culture shock in my own country,
Mhm.
which was really funny. I think like the first month that I was there, I was messaging my husband something every day, like, oh my gosh, I'm in the grocery store and everything's in English. Or like, you know, one of the other things was there were some girls, my cousin and I had taken our daughters to go ice skating, and there were girls walking around the mall where these girls could not have been over the age of 13 or 14.
So young
And they're
teens.
walking around very young teenagers, like brand new teenagers,
Mhm.
walking around with a lot of makeup
Mhm.
and shirts. They're crop tops, but they're
Mhm.
very, very low cut crop
They're
tops,
showing a lot of flesh.
showing a lot of skin. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, it made me uncomfortable
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's like, I don't understand why these girls want to portray themselves in that manner. I would rather somebody talk about me and go, oh yeah, she's really smart, or oh yeah, she
Right.
has a lot of really cool things to say, or oh yeah, she has a lot of like
That never
really
seems to be
cool
an
traits.
option when it comes to women. It doesn't give them that same high
Right.
rush of fulfillment if someone says, "Oh my God, you're really smart," as if they say, "Oh my God, you're really pretty."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you portray yourself that way, like people, they're going to make those assumptions.
Mhm. You're going to get treated that way if you present
And you're going to
yourself.
get, you're
Yeah.
going to, you present yourself, people are going to make assumptions because that's what people do.
Yeah.
And it just, it puts girls in a very vulnerable position because you dress like that. People are going to think that you're older.
Mhm.
So, you know, if somebody doesn't know any better and they think these girls are, you know, 16, 17 years old, and there's a 22-year-old guy talking to them, and then these girls are like, oh my gosh, like I dress like this and now I have the attention from all of these older men and I'm really loving it and I'm going to play into it and I'm going to go talk to this guy, and you know, now we're going to start dating, and then you end up with
Barefoot and pregnant.
yeah, well, you end up essentially with a pedophile situation
Yeah, that too.
where
Yeah.
this girl is, you know, 12 or 13 and dating a guy who's in his 20s, and the
Yeah.
parents have no idea because, you know, a lot of parents are oblivious and don't know these things, and kids have gotten really good at hiding and sneaking around,
Oh yeah.
especially in the age of social media. It's a lot easier to be talking to people.
Yeah, because back in the days, you actually had to be there with somebody, you know, or
Mm-hmm.
know their phone number. But then your parents could see you on the phone. Who are you on the phone with? Now,
Yep, exactly.
you hide somewhere on your little device, and who knows where you are in the virtual world.
Yeah, and you've got things like, you know, Snapchat where the messages disappear after you open them, so it's not like
Right.
you can really track their conversations and see who they're talking to.
Yeah. It's a strange new world that we're in. And I'm just kind of worried for my daughter. I really am.
Yeah, and I just saw in the news and it blew my mind. I can't remember how old the girl was, but she was a young teenage girl. She was like 13, somewhere in there. Showed up at the hospital with her boyfriend who was in his 20s, and in their mind, we're showing up at the hospital to have a baby and we're going to leave as a happy family. And the hospital authorities find out this girl is 13, pregnant by a man who's in his 20s. They get the cops involved and he gets arrested. And both of them, the teenager and the 20-year-old man, are both confused as to why he's being arrested, because in their mind, like, this is a
That's
perfectly
wrong.
normal and healthy relationship. And I'm just like, where were the parents?
Yeah.
Where were her parents protecting her from him? And where were his parents telling him to stop being an idiot?
Yeah. I don't know where these people come from, but I know like culturally that was way more acceptable. Because I remember being a young guy, I mean, really young. I got to be like maybe third grade. And I remember knowing a person, or at least hearing the story of a 13-year-old girl marrying a 30-year-old guy. And no one
Yeah.
seemed to like really, they were, what I remember people saying was like, oh yeah, over here, that's not okay. But back over there, you know, whatever country they came from, that's normal. That happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Child marriages are normal for cultures still today, which boggles my brain. But
You know, I get it. Some of them do it for financial reasons and
yeah.
all kinds of stuff, man. That's just yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember specifics because it's been a while since I've looked into it, but I do know there's some countries where as soon as those little girls start hitting their menstrual cycle, they get married off because, you know,
Like Game
parents
of
need money.
Thrones.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Like, hey, I need, like my family needs money. I have a daughter who is able to produce babies. If you give me money, you can marry my daughter.
Yep.
And that's a normal thing. I'm just
Yeah.
like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad I'm not part of that culture.
I know, it's crazy. All right, Heather. Thank you so much for coming on my show. I hope you agree to be a guest some other time.
Sure. It was fun.